You all may have noticed I've recently started a new series on my YouTube channel titled A Dude Reviews Romance Novels. I am a dude, and I'm reviewing romance novels. Now, I'm still pretty new to the romance genre as a whole, but I've realized a few things about this. First, most of these books are written by women for women, which makes sense. Second, a lot of these books give up on plot for the sake of wish fulfillment and fantasy from a female perspective, which is something I can totally get behind. I recently reviewed a couple romance novels that I recently read. One was terrible. The other one was pretty good. So I wanted to find a solid middle ground. What romance novel is between really good and really bad? That's when I found a new author, or rather an author I haven't read yet. Her name is Nicole Snow. And using a random wheel spinner, I selected one of her books to read and review for all of you today. The book in question is called Still Not Over You by Nicole Snow. As we begin reading this book, we start learning more about our characters, their motivations, who they are, what they're doing in the world, all the standard romance novel things. Our female love interest is named Kenna, and Kenna is a struggling romance author who's down on some hard times. Her brother, Steve, comes to her with an offer. You can go watch this house on the California coast for 2 to 3 weeks. No rent paid. All you have to do, watch the house. You can work on your next romance novel. Everything will work out. The house in question belongs to our male romance interest. His name is Landon. Landon is an ex-soldier, and Landon currently owns a personal security business. He provides security for celebrities, VIPs, things like that. And in the first 5 chapters to 10 chapters, we realize that Kenna and Landon do not mesh well. Landon is very against the idea of having Kenna anywhere near him. The reason goes back and gets covered in a series of flashbacks throughout the book. But suffice to say, Landon does not vibe with Kenna. Landon is very short, curt, rude. He's honestly pretty mean to start off the book. And we learn about his motivations for why he's being mean later on. Throughout the first 5 chapters, we're just going throughout the process of learning about these characters, learning about their motivations, learning some funny character quirks about them. Landon, the male love interest, is very into cats. He loves cats. He has 2 pet cats, and they play a big role throughout the book. So it's very interesting, and it's very enlightening to see the way the author handles these first few chapters. And this is when we start to realize something. This is not just a romance novel. It is a murder mystery. So in order to do each of these plot lines justice, I'm going to split the remainder of this video, breaking down the plots. The romance subplot and the murder mystery subplot. Because hoo boy, it's a doozy. So, the romance subplot starts off very antagonistic. Neither of these characters like each other. Kenna spends the entire first 4 to 5 chapters completely terrified of Landon. And Landon spends the first 5 chapters being what you could generously call abusive. He's kind of being a massive asshole. So, we're getting into this. Neither of these characters like each other. Landon is very hesitant about having her there. Kenna is very hesitant about staying there. And we're splicing in romance with the murder mystery conspiracy subplot we have going on. But one interesting thing to note is This book is about 230, 240 pages. We make it to page 39 before Landon starts having fantasies of having sex with Kenna. And the fantasies start to ramp up throughout the next few chapters. And it's not just one-sided on Landon's part. Kenna's also having the same feelings. Which brings me back to my previous point I made earlier on, where the plot takes a backseat. The plot is merely a vehicle to get to the romance part of the book. So as we keep moving forward, their relationship starts to thaw a little bit. And Landon gets a new job. His job is to watch over a burgeoning pop star who needs a security detail for a tour she's on. So Kenna's job is to keep an eye on the house while Landon is out and about doing security guard things, right? And there's one very notable scene where Landon brings home this pop star. Her name is Mila, right? Mila is just hanging out, and Mila is all over Landon. Mila wants Landon a lot because she's a pop star. She's entitled. She thinks that Landon is her employee, therefore he has to do whatever she wants. And Kenna, at one point, just gets very mad at Mila because they're all in a room together, they're all talking. Kenna is being bullied, essentially, by Mila. And Kenna eventually just goes up and kisses Landon, saying, "He's my boyfriend. You can't have him." Very possessive. Another romance novel trope. And Landon, again, has been having these fantasies, so he's not entirely against it, right? As we keep moving on, though, they've kissed, they're talking to each other, the relationship is still taut with tension, and eventually Mila just starts sexually harassing Landon. And Kenna sees this as Landon is letting it happen, even though it's just blatant sexual misconduct by this pop star. Regardless of how you try to play it off, that's just what it is, straight up sexual harassment. So Kenna misunderstands the situation and leaves the house. She goes back to hang out with Steve and live at Steve's place. Landon has realized that he does not want this to happen. He's started to develop feelings for her. So he goes back down south, down the coast of California, and he climbs over the back fence of Steve's place where Kenna's hanging out. And there is a very long, very, very explicit sex scene that goes on for 10 to 20 pages, where Kenna and Landon just have sex in Kenna's brother's backyard. Now, they're not exactly subtle about it, which comes back to bite them in the ass later on, but they start their relationship here. Landon and Steve have both been friends for a while, right? Back before the book even began. And Landon takes Kenna back to his beachside house where they're hanging out, and Steve comes all the way up. He drives 2 to 3 hours north to get to this house, where he confronts Landon. Landon has been lying to Steve about what he's up to in his security guard business. The murder mystery subplot takes a big role in this part of the story, because the reason Landon has been so rude to Kenna is because of this murder mystery subplot, right? Kenna read his journal on the day that Landon's father died. So Landon's father died. It is said straight up he was most likely murdered. So she read his journal and saw what a dark monster Landon was. Landon didn't know how to handle this, so he just lashed out, and he became very rude and violent towards Kenna for the next 10 years, which gets us up to the plot of this book. And their romance, there's a big break. It's a big moment in the story where these two characters have a massive break. They've had 2 weeks where they've been having sex very consistently in very explicit, detailed scenes throughout the book. And eventually, Landon doesn't know what to do when he's confronted, so he just runs away. Straight up, he just ditches her. Which, unhealthy coping mechanism, for sure. But it looks like we have an irrevocable break between these two characters. Landon goes to be the security guard at one of Mila's shows, right? And Kenna goes to try to win him back, try to bring him back to the light side, as it were. And this is where the murder mystery subplot that I'm going to get into later, I promise, is front and center. Massive climax of the story happens, a lot of shit goes down, and after all of this happens, Landon and Kenna decide to get married. Which, extremely fast, might I just say. They've only been hanging out with each other for a month-ish. So, it's kind of a jarring shift, right? And I think that's something that a lot of romance novels do, where they give up reality for the sake of convenience. But these people have just been having sex for 2 weeks and then decided to get married all of a sudden. Even though they clearly both have a lot of issues to work through. So as to whether or not this would last, the jury's out. This is the first book in a series of 4, so I'm assuming it probably does. But yeah, they get married, and they have a kid, and they live happily ever after. But the more interesting part of this book to me is honestly not the romance. The more interesting part of this book is the murder mystery part of it, which we're about to get into. The murder mystery part of this book is far and away the most interesting subplot I have read in a romance novel so far. Hands down. I actually really enjoy the way the murder mystery part plays out, so I'm going to get into that for you guys. So, the reason that Kenna and Landon had this big split 10 years ago is because Landon's father, Micah Strauss, went missing, and they found his body just laying somewhere, right? Landon is convinced that his father was murdered. His father was a partner, like a sub-owner, of a large security firm called Crown Security. Crown Security does the same thing that Landon's security business, Engard Security, does. They both provide security for VIPs, celebrities, people like that. So Landon has spent the last 10 years trying to suss out who murdered his father. And he has an ongoing business rivalry with the current owner of Crown Securities. It is his name is Dallas, right? Dallas Reese, has been kind of stringing Landon along for the last 10 years, feeding him little drippy-droppy details about who really murdered his father. And Landon's gone down a really dark path. He's on a Batman arc right now. He just wants to straight up find his father's killer and murder him in revenge. Which is a very interesting subplot, and I think it plays into the feminine love interest wants like a bad boy, like I can tame the darkness in him kind of plot that goes on throughout this book. But we get into the murder mystery thing, and a lot of very spooky incidents crop up. While Kenna's watching the house, when Landon's doing the security detail, someone tries to burn the house down. And Dallas Reese just pulls out of nowhere, scares the would-be arsonist away. And Dallas and Landon have a long, hushed conversation about new details that have come out about the murder. Again, they're business rivals, but Landon sees Dallas as the only person who can realistically get him information on the murder of his father. We keep moving on, and it starts to become very clear that all of this is a plot orchestrated by Dallas Reese to take over Enguard Securities, right? Again, Landon split off from Crown Securities, the business his father worked at, to form his own because he didn't like the way Crown did things. This business rivalry has turned into a hostile takeover / murder plot by Dallas Reese. So someone tries to burn down Landon's beachfront house, and in the climax, these incidents keep propping up. And in the climax of the book, we finally realize what Dallas's master plan the whole time has been. He wants his security business to run all of the VIP security for Southern California. It's a lucrative market. Hollywood, pop stars, things like that. So, at one of Milo's shows, the pop star, Dallas Reese tries to straight up murder Milo the pop star by putting a variety of drugs inside one of her bottles of alcohol, right? And the way he goes about this is he tries to frame Kenna for the murder. He says it's an open and shut case, a desperate lover trying to keep her security business boyfriend, and he poisons Kenna and tries to frame her for the attempted assassination of this pop star. A very interesting scene then occurs where Landon comes in, stops Dallas from murdering Kenna, and that's when we find out that the murderer of Landon's father was in fact Dallas. So Dallas has been stringing along Landon for 10 years when he was the one who killed the dad. So Landon, in his big character moment, beats Dallas to within an inch of his life. There's a firefight going on backstage between the two security firms. Enguard is shooting at the Crown security people, and Landon beats Dallas nearly to death. And the only reason he doesn't is because Kenna looks at him in a drugged stupor and is like, "Don't do it." So Landon doesn't murder him. And it's a big character shift. Landon has gone from only seeking to avenge his father to seeking love. And this nerdy romance author has brought him back to the light, so it would seem. So I'd have to say the murder mystery part of this book, very engrossing. I loved it personally. But we're going to get into some of my favorite quotes from the book, and then I'll give you guys my final review. So I think my top 3 quotes for this book have to be the following. I'm not type A. I'm type ADHD. He closes his eyes in sheer delight and thrusts it against my fingers. This is in reference to a cat. There is a dark god pushing against me. This is actually not about a cat. So my thoughts on this book are conflicting. On the one hand, I think the romance subplot was handled pretty poorly, if I'm being completely honest. I'm not a big fan of the romance novel trope that a guy is just an asshole and it somehow manifests into a lifelong relationship within the course of like a month. And that's something that's very common, and that's something that I don't think works in this story. The murder mystery side of it, though, I actually really enjoyed. It was pretty interesting to read about these hostile takeover plots and attempted murderings. It was pretty good. Overall, I would have to give this book a 3 out of 5. I think the murder mystery subplot is an easy 4 out of 5, while the romance for me was a 2 out of 5. So we're going to split the difference. But it's not bad. It's not good, but it's not bad. Thank you all for watching. Now stop watching. Go read this book.